Here we are at another Snowball Reads. But first, boiled cream treat. And a little bit of Alto wine. Snowball is always putting on a voice for these readings. Why not? Make it more interesting. Snowball is going to read this series in order, so Snowball can get through all of them. Now, to start, the Real Barenziah Volume 1 by Anonymous. 500 years ago, in Mournhold, city of gems, there lived a blind widow, her only child, a tall, strapping young man. He was a miner, as was his father before him, a common laborer in the mines of the Lord of Mournhold. For his ability in magica was small. The work was honorable but paid poorly. His mother made and sold comberry cakes at the city markets to help eke out their living. They did well enough, she said. They had enough to fill their bellies. No one could wear more than one suit of clothing at a time, and the roof leaked only when it rained. But Simraptor would have liked more. He hoped for a lucky strike at the mines, which would garner him a large bonus. In his free hours he enjoyed hoisting a mug of ale in the tavern with his friends and gambling with them at cards. He also drew the eyes and sights of more than one pretty elven lass. Although none held his interest for long, he was a typical young dark elf, a Dumner, of pleasant descent, remarkable only for his size. It was rumored that he had a bit of Nordic blood in him. They're not that tall either. In Samachus's third year, there was a great rejoicing in Mournhold. A girl child had been born to the lord and lady, a queen. The people sang, "A queen is born to us." For among the people of Mournhold, the birth of an heiress is a sure sign of future peace and prosperity. When the time came around for the royal child's rite of naming, the mines were closed, and Simachus dashed home and to bathe and dress in his best. "I'll rush straight home and tell you all about it," he promised his mother, who would not be able to attend. She had been ailing, and besides, there would be a great crush of people, as all of Mournhold turned out to be part of the blessed event. And being blind, she would be unable to see anything anyway. "My son," she said, "afore you go, fetch me a priest or a healer, else I may pass from the mortal plane ere you return." Ere you return? Weird. Simraptor crossed to her pallet at once and noted anxiously that her forehead was very hot and her breathing shallow. He pried loose a slate of wooden floor under which their small board of savings was kept. There wasn't nearly enough to pay a priest for healing. He would have to give what they had owed. He would have to give what they had and owe the rest. Simraptor snatched up his cloak and hurried away. The streets were full of folk, hurrying hurrying, that's an H, hurrying to the sacred grove. But the temples were locked and barred, closed for the ceremony, read all the sign. Simraptor elbowed his way through the mob and managed to overtake a brown-robed priest. After the rite, brother, the priest said, if you have gold, I shall gladly attend to your mother. My lord has bidden all clerics attend, and I, for one, have no wish to offend him. My mother is desperately ill, Simraptor pleaded. Surely my lord will not miss one lowly priest. True, but the archcanon will. And the priest said tearing his robe loose from Simraptor, despite grip and desperate. That's what it was. True, but the archcanon will, the priest said nervously, tearing his robe loose from Simrapor's desperate grip and vanishing into the crowd. Simraptor tried other priests and even a few mages, but with no better results. Armed guards marched through the street and pushed him aside with their lances, and Simraptor realized that the royal procession was approaching. As the carriage bearing a city's ruler drew abreast, Simraptor rushed out from the crowd and shouted, my lord, my mother is dying. I forbid her to do so on this glorious night, the lord shouted, laughed, and scattered coin into the throng. Simraptor was close enough to smell wine on the royal breath. On the other side of the carriage, his lady clutched the babe to her breast and stared slit-eyed at Simraptor. Her nostrils flared in disdain. Guard, she cried, remove this oaf. Rough hands seized Simraptor. He was beaten and left dazed by the side of the road. Simrapor's head aching, followed in the wake of the crowd and witnessed the rite of naming from the top of a hill. He could see the brown-robed clerics and the blue-robed mages gathered near the high-born folk far below. Barenziah. The name came dimly to Simrapor's ears as the high priest lifted the swaddled babe and proffered her to the twin moons on either side of the horizon. Joan rising, Jode setting. Behold, the Lady Barenziah, born to the land of Mournhold. Grant her by thy blessings and thy counsel, ye King of gods, that she may ever rule well over Mournhold, its kin and its well, its kith and its ilk. Bless her, all the people intoned along with the lord and lady, hands upraised. Only Simraptor only Simraptor stood silent, head bowed, knowing in his heart that his dear mother was gone, and in silence he swore a mighty oath that he should be his lord's bane, and in vengeance for his mother's needless death, the child Barenziah he should have for his own bride, and that his mother's grandchildren should be born to rule Mournhold. After the ceremony, he watched impassively as the royal procession returned to the palace. He saw the priest to whom he had first spoken. The man came gladly enough now in return for the gold Simraptor had, and a promise of more afterwards. They found his mother dead. The priest sighed and tucked the pouch of gold coins away. I'm sorry, brother. It's all right. You can forget the rest of the gold. There's aught I can do here, likely. Give me back my money, Simraptor snarled. You've done naught to earn it. He lifted his right arm threateningly. The priest backed away, about to utter a curse, but Simraptor struck him across his face. Simraptor struck him across the face before more than 3 words had left his mouth. He went down heavily, striking his head sharply on one of the stones that formed the fire pit, and he died instantly. Snowball wishes magicians would go down that quickly. Simraptor snatched up the gold and fled the city. As he ran, he muttered one word over and over again like a sorcerer's chant. Barenziah, he said. Barenziah, Barenziah. Barenziah stood on the... Stood? The baby? Okay. Barenziah stood on one of the balconies of the palace, staring down at the courtyard where the soldiers milled, dazzling in their armor. Presently they formed into ordered ranks and cheered as her parents, the lord and lady, emerged from the palace, clad from head to toe in ebony armor. Long purple-dyed fur cloaks flowing behind, splendidly caparisoned, shining black horses. Shining black horses were brought for them, and they mounted and rode to the courtyard gates and turned to salute her. Barenziah, they cried, Barenziah, our beloved, farewell. The little girl blinked back tears and waved one hand bravely. Her favorite stuffed animal, a gray wolf cub she called Woofin, clutched to her breast with the other. She had never been parted from her parents before and had no idea what it meant, save that there was a war in the West, and the name Tiber Septim was on everybody's lips, spoken in hate and dread. Barenziah, the soldiers cried, lifting their lances and swords and bows. Then her dear parents turned and rode away, knights trailing in their wake, until the courtyard was nearly emptied. Some time after that day, when Barenziah was shaken awake by her nurse, dressed hurriedly, and borne from the palace, all she could remember of the dreadful time was seeing a huge shadow with burning eyes filling the sky. She passed from hand to hand. Foreign soldiers appeared, disappeared, and sometimes reappeared. Her nurse vanished and was replaced by strangers, some more strange than others. There were days, or it may have been weeks, of travel. One morning she awoke to step out of the coach, and a cold palace with a large gray stone castle amid empty, endless gray-green hills, covered patchily with gray-white snow. She clutched Woofin to her breast in both hands, and stood blinking and shivering in the gray dawn, feeling very small and very dark in all this endless space, the endless gray-white space. She and Hannah, a brown-skinned, black-haired maid, who had been traveling with her for several days, went inside a keep. A large gray-white woman with icy gray-golden hair was standing by a hearth in one of the rooms. She stared at Barenziah with dreadful, bright blue eyes. She's very, black, isn't she? The woman remarked to Hannah, I've never seen a dark elf before. I don't know much about them myself, m'lady, Hannah said, but this one's got red hair and a temper to match. I can tell you that. Take care, she bites, And worse. I'll soon train her out of that, the other woman sniffed. And what's that filthy thing she's got? Ugh! The woman snatched Wolfen away and threw him onto the blazing hearth. Barenziah shrieked and would have flung herself after him, but was held back despite her attempts to bite and claw at her captors. Poor Wolfen was reduced to a tiny heap of charred ash. Well, they're assholes. How many more do I have? Apparently this is a long one. Barenziah grew like a reed, transplanted to a Skyrim garden, a ward of Count Seven, and his wife, the Lady Inga. Outwardly, that is, she thrived, but always there was a cold and empty place within. I've raised her as my own daughter, Lady Inga was excuse me. Lady Inga was wont to sigh as she sat gossiping when the neighboring ladies came to visit. But she's a dark elf. What can you expect? Barenziah was not meant to overhear those words. At least she thought she was not. Her hearing was keener than that of her Nordic hosts. Others less desirable dark elven traits evidently included pilfering, lying, and a little misplaced magic. Just a small fire spell here and a little levitation spell there. And as she grew older, a keen interest in boys and men who could provide very pleasant sensations, and to her astonishment, gifts as well. Inga disapproved of this, last for reasons incomprehensible to Barenziah. She was careful to keep it as secret as possible. She's wonderful with the children, Inga added, referring to her 5 sons, all younger than Barenziah. I don't think she'd ever let them come to harm. A tutor had been hired when Johnny was 6 and Barenziah 8, and they took her lessons together. She would have liked to train in arms as well. But the very idea scandalized Count Seven and Lady Inga. So Barenziah was given a small bow and allowed to play at target shooting with the boys. She watched them at arms, practiced when she could, sparred with them when no grown-up folk were about, and knew she was good as or better than they. She's very proud, though, isn't she? One of the ladies would whisper to Inga, and Barenziah, pretending not to hear, would nod silently in agreement. She could not help but feel superior to the Count and his lady. There was something about them that provoked contempt. There was something about them that provoked contempt. Afterward, she came to learn that Seven and Inga were distant cousins of Darkmoor. Wow, this is still long. Afterward, she came to learn that Seven and Inga were distant cousins of Darkmoor's Keep. Last titled residents? What? Afterward, she came to learn that Seven and Inga were distant cousins of Darkmoor Keep's last titled residents, and she finally understood. They were posers, impostors, not rulers at all. At least they were not raised to rule. This thought made her strangely furious at them, a good, clean hatred quite detached from resentment. She came to see them as disgusting and repellent insects, who could be despised but never feared. Once a month, a courier came from the emperor, bringing a small bag of gold for 7 in Inga, and as a large and as I keep seeing things that are not there, apparently. Once a month, a courier came from the emperor, bringing a small bag of gold for 7 and Inga, and a large bag of dried mushrooms from Morrowind for Barenziah, her favorite treat. One of these occasions, she was always made to look presentable. On these occasions, she was always made to look presentable, or at least as presentable as a skinny dark elf could be made to look in Inga's eyes, before being summoned into the courier's presence for a brief interview. The same courier seldom came twice, but all of them looked her over in much the same way a farmer would look over a hog he is readying for market. In the spring of her 16th year, Barenziah thought the courier looked as if she were at last ready for market. Upon reflection, she decided she did not wish to be marketed. The stable boy, Straw, a big, muscular, blond lad, clumsy, gentle, affectionate, and rather simple, had been urging her to run off for some weeks. Now Barenziah stole the bag of gold the courier had left, took the mushrooms from the storeroom, disguised herself as a boy in one of Joni's old tunics, and a pair of his cast-off breeches. On one fine spring night, she and Straw took the 2 best horses from the stable and rode hard through the night towards Whiterun, the nearest city of any importance, and the place where Straw wanted to be. But Mournhold and Morrowind also lay eastward, and they drew Barenziah as a lodestone draws iron. In the morning they abandoned the horses at Barenziah's instance. She knew that they would insistence. That's what that was. Insistence. She knew they would be missed and tracked down, and she hoped to throw off any pursuers. They continued on foot until late afternoon, keeping to the side roads, and slept for several hours in an abandoned hut. They went on at dusk and came to Whiterun city gates just before dawn. Barenziah had prepared a pass of sorts for her Straw, and a makeshift document stating an errand to the temple in the city for a local village lord. She herself gilded over the wall with the help of a levitation spell. She had reasoned correctly, as it turned out, that by now the gate guards would have been alerted to keep an eye out for the young dark elven girl and a Nordic boy traveling together. On the other hand, unaccompanied country yokels like Straw were a common enough sight, alone and with papers. It was unlikely that he would draw attention. Her simple plan went smoothly. She met Straw at the temple, which was not far from the gate. She had been to Whiterun on a few previous occasions. Straw, however, had never been more than a few miles from Seven's estate, which was his birthplace. Together they made their way to a rundown inn in the poorer quarters of Whiterun, gloved, cloaked, and hooded against the morning chill. Barenziah's dark skin and red eyes were not apparent, and no one paid any heed to them. They entered the inn separately. Straw paid the innkeeper for a single cubicle and an immense meal, and 2 jugs of ale. Barenziah sneaked in a few minutes later. They ate and drank together, gleefully rejoicing in their escape, and made love vigorously on the narrow cot. Afterward, they fell asleep, an exhausted, dreamless sleep. Snowball's going to have to leave it off there. This is really a long book. Snowball will be back, continuing from the chapter he left off. This book will all be posted on the same day, though. So, have a good day. Bye-bye.